Our judges are back. They've finished their difficult deliberations, and they're going to provide first some feedback to each of our 10 YLAI fellows, which I think will be really helpful for you. You should think about refining your presentations, and then we'll have an announcement of the winners. So judges, I'll hand the floor over to you.
Actually, I don't think we'll go kind of one at a time. Let us make some general observations. First of all, it was really great. And it was fun to see you trying to balance social impact and business, and to try to get that balance right without compromise. You know, Darden's a home of stakeholder theory, and we try and understand that you can serve all your stakeholders without compromise. It's not a trade-off, and I thought that was great. Interestingly, one of the things we touched on, and you guys ought to jump in, especially when I go dry. A lot more thinking on distribution and what your customer really gets out of it would help. You know, how are you going to go to market? You know, who you're going to get there, and why is the customer buying what they're buying? You know, is it because of the design? Is it because they love the story? In the case of Peruvian coffee, why aren't they drinking coffee? You know, and is a roasted coffee going to sell because it appeals to connoisseurship, or because the coffee house is a place they want to go? You recreate Starbucks' third place. It's, you know, it's easy in a business to focus on the mechanics of the business, but the really successful ones get into the head of their customer.
That's right. Yeah, I think that is something that across the board, the more market research that you do and that you can show to support your decision making is absolutely key. And as David said, making sure that you know what the end user of your product or your service is, and how they'll respond to your product, and then how do you get to that. And if it's through someone else, making sure that they know your story and they can actually tell it as well as you can, and you need to provide them tools and give them coaching on how to present your product, whether it's placing it in the right place for candy, or how they present shoes, or how they position your coffee in a store. So that's something. The other thing we talked about was really looking at scalability for your businesses. You know, looking at where are you going to run into roadblocks in terms of scalability, and considering that as you're refining your business. So,
you know, just from the foodie perspective of things, you know, as she mentioned, understanding your customer's experience. There's a lot of you get stuck in your head and you have no idea what your customer wants. The other way to sell your product, whether it's coffee or caramel or fudge, is tasting samples. I mean, that's something that your salespeople and your customers want. That's the way to someone's heart. So that was.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's much left to be said. I guess I would think there were a handful of companies, you know, where I would be concerned about. I'm not an academic. I don't know if this is a proper term for it, but something around sort of brand elasticity, meaning the product that you're pitching, there's something very authentic about it. If you sort of stray from that, I'm not sure that you're doing your brand justice. Just, you might want to keep that in mind.
Yeah, another thing I'll say about brand is that it seemed like several of the products that were presented have an opportunity to be a real premium brand. So, for instance, with shoes, you know, pricing yourself up to that 500 point, you know, maybe if you actually went above that, if you do the numbers, maybe it just, you know, you may not sell as many, but you actually make more money if you sell it as a really ultra premium product. So really thinking about how you know, where do you place, you know, coconut milk, or, you know, where, you know, think about your product, and if you can really make it a premium brand versus something that is just competing against something else, because it's really hard to do that. But if you come out with, this is the creme de la, this is the best one, you don't even have to address some of those other competitive issues. So.
And kind of last point, Liz-Ann quoted Jim Collins, and I would encourage all of you to look at Good for Great in the social sector, because he talks about a resource engine. And there were several of the things people talked about where it wasn't clear where the resources were going to come from. And in a commercial business, the resources are money. Often in the not-for-profit world, the resources are the passion of your volunteers and the rest. And so a question you need to keep asking is, do I have an operating model that will give me access to the resources that I need to succeed? And again, there were some cases where it was much clearer than others. Questions on this kind of high-level generic feedback?
3 minutes.
Again, I go back to where we started. You know, you guys were selected for your passion and what you're trying to make, difference you're trying to make in the world, and that actually showed up. We took a longer time to discuss. I don't know why I'm doing all the talking.
You're good at it.
Oh. Well, I spent a lot of time in these kind of rooms. We spent a lot of time talking because there were a lot of attractive elements to all of the presentations, but we have to make a choice. For second place, it would be Liziane Silva. And
Drew, do you want to do a photo op up front with me, Neil, and Liz? You get to go in the middle.
while they're doing the photo op, if I were to try to synthesize what we like, it is a clear sense of impact, a kind of very tight focus on what it is she does that is different, and a pretty clear sense of where the money's going to come from, and a demonstrable track record. I think the challenge is going to be scaling, and you know, your time at CNE, I think, probably gave you some insight as to how to strike that balance between intense local focus and changing the whole world. And Alpha.
You're the winner.
You're the winner. We tried not to give it merely on the strength of the presentation. There were a couple of things we liked. One was, you know, the very clear aspiration rooted in a very genuine social need. Now, those of us who've grown up around America, where it takes $250,000 in equipment to run a farm, you know, thought that the challenges in farming were more about capital than motivation. But we were also very intrigued by your positioning of why. And you very quietly touched on the linkage to 4-H for the how, but to sit there and play very early in the stream of getting people interested and using the high involvement of Agroman, we thought was a very interesting solution. So even though you're much less proven out than a lot of the other things we've seen, the aspiration and the creativity and the very distinctive role you're playing in that stream of creating the people who will feed us, we thought was particularly interesting.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
One more with Alpha Holland.
But while they're doing that,
Thank you.
you all really did an excellent job, and it was really it was hard to decide, you know, who should be 2 and 1, because all of you have wonderful things that are going on, and you have great ideas, and you really presented things well. So kudos for you all for doing this and having the courage to actually start your own businesses, and we really hope that you're going to be very successful.